Hello and welcome to our first Stellarian Games video. Today we're going to be walking you through how to make a rustic farmhouse. First up, we're going to make a lot of bricks. We're adjusting the guide on the hot wire cutter to cut 1/4 inch strips, and then we're going to cut out a whole bunch of 1/4 inch strips. These will be used for the bricks in just a moment. Now we're cutting those strips into individual brick components. We're breaking those brick components up, putting them into a coffee can with some stones, shaking that up so that it gives each of those individual stones a nice texture. Thanks to Black Magic Craft for the idea. I know he got this idea from the community as well. Now that we have a big pile of stones, it's time to start cutting out the shape of the actual farmhouse frame. We're measuring 3 inches wide on each of those, and then 1.5 inches above that for the angle of the roof. We're just following those traced lines, cutting them perpendicular. We're cutting the roof sections off now. We'll hot glue those on in a moment, but it's just easier for the cutting. We're hot gluing the different pieces together so that we make the body of the farmhouse. Now we're just attaching the angled parts of the roof. Now we're using foam core to construct the actual rooftop itself, making these a little bit longer than the rest of the farmhouse so that it sticks out on each end. Cutting those out so that we have sections of the roof, and then we're beveling one edge so that it'll meet in the peak of the roof. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be covering it later on. We're hot gluing those roof sections onto the styrofoam on both sides, and now we've got a rough framed out farmhouse. We're measuring out 1 inch by 1.5 inch doorway. So this will actually be the door itself. We're giving a little bit of an arch and then cutting it out on the hot wire cutter. Now we're measuring a little bit thinner, and we're going to run that same bit through, and that'll actually be our door that we glue on to the farmhouse. We're giving the door some texture with some a pencil for the actual planks, and then a steel brush to give it some wood texture. Here's just another little styrofoam sliver that we're cutting holes out of for the windows. We're gluing on a couple extra strips to the door to give it some unique features, and then gluing that to the farmhouse itself. Also gluing on the window. This is just with regular white glue. Now we're going to start attaching the stonework to the house. We're using hot glue, and you can see I'm not running a very long section of hot glue in front of the bricks because it does want to set up pretty quickly. So I'm just putting enough down so that I can put a few bricks down before it sets up, and then continue on with the hot glue. The last one I'm just cutting so that it fits next to the door, and then I'll start the next course running in the opposite direction, going a little bit faster this time. Now that we have the course down, we'll just continue running these bricks alternating across each other so that it looks like stonework on the farmhouse. And we'll keep going until it gets to the top of the door. And then I put in some slivers of styrofoam so that it looks like archway stones over the door. Then we'll continue filling it in with the other stones up to the top of the house. Now we're cutting very thin strips of styrofoam, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, or more like 1/16 of an inch thick, and we're going to use that as our roof shingles. We're hot gluing it in layers and just kind of rubbing that into place, and it'll kind of bend and warp into place with the hot glue. Once that kind of sets up a little bit, you can cut that off on one side. Then we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. These are just individual thin strips of the styrofoam. We're cutting that off, and then we're putting one of the thinner strips on over the top and kind of bending it into place with the hot glue, and it'll keep it in place until you're ready to cut it off. Now we start texturing the individual shingles, and that's simply done with a pencil to give it individual shingle breaks. Then we're going to come along with an X-Acto knife and cut little bits off of some of them so that it gives it a little bit more uneven look than the flat row of styrofoam. Once all of those are cut off, then we use the steel brush and texture the whole thing. And then I'm coming through with a sculpting tool and just adding a little bit more definition to each of those individual shingle lines. I'm using an X-Acto to cut off any extra runs of the stonework that sticks out over the corners. And then I'm cutting one of the shingle strips in half, texturing it with a steel brush so that it gives it a wood texture, and then beveling and angling that cut so that we can cover that end of the styrofoam with what looks like a plank. We're going to just cut those off so that it looks nice and repeat the same thing on the other end. And that's it for the construction. Now we start by coating the entire thing in black. I'm using a mixture of black paint and Mod Podge as seen on the Black Magic Craft channel. Once that's done, I'm just using house paint to finish the actual painting. I'm using a kind of a dark brown to base coat the entire piece. And I'm going to use a light gray and do a very light dry brush to give the stonework a stone look. And then I'm going to use the tan to give the roof a little bit lighter brown color. I'm using that same brown to highlight the window frame just because it's out and available and easy to do. Then I'm going to use some of the lighter brown, the darker brown, and the gray to give individual bricks a bit of a highlight on the building itself. It might look a little bit garish with the light colors to begin with, but our next step is going to be giving the entire piece black wash, and that should knock some of that highlighted bricks down a little bit. This is the same black wash that the Black Magic Craft uses on his channel as well. And there's our finished piece. We hope you enjoyed this construction and gives you some ideas and maybe some inspiration to take on a project like this of your own. Thank you.